No explanation, no terms, no offer of negotiation, just a number ticking downward, and 3 words that left no room for hope. But something confused the scientists and military analysts who were already working in emergency facilities around the world. Something that didn't fit. The alien fleet possessed the obvious technological capability to destroy Earth in minutes, perhaps seconds. The mathematics of their formation, the ease with which they had neutralized every defense system, the sheer scale of the vessels above, all of it pointed to a power so overwhelming that resistance was not merely futile but conceptually absurd. And yet they were waiting. More than that, they were keeping their distance, maintaining an orbit that seemed almost cautious, as if whatever waited below them on that small blue world made them afraid to get any closer. Deep beneath a mountain range at a location known only by a 9-digit code in 3 classified databases, a team of 17 people gathered around a machine that most of them had spent their careers hoping they would never be ordered to use. The facility had been built to survive everything: nuclear strikes, asteroid impacts, total civilizational collapse. Its walls were 12 feet of reinforced concrete and steel, and its air supply was entirely self-contained. It had been designed as a last resort, and now, with a countdown above showing 6 to 9 hours and 43 minutes, it was exactly that. The transmitter at the center of the chamber was old by the standards of the technology that surrounded it. It had been built 40 years earlier, in secret, following an incident that had never appeared in any public record. Its designers had called it Project Echo, a name deliberately chosen to sound mundane. Its true function was anything but. Dr. Mearham stood before the central console and stared at the waveform pulsing slowly on the screen in front of him. He was 58 years old, the world's foremost expert on non-terrestrial signal theory, and he had devoted his life to the question of whether humanity was alone in the universe. He had answered that question 3 days ago, along with everyone else on Earth, when the sky went dark. Now he was being asked to answer a different one. He pressed his fingertips lightly against the screen, and the waveform pulsed beneath them like a living thing, like a heartbeat. "This is not a message," he said quietly, to no one in particular. "It's a beacon." Nobody answered him. They already knew. Project Echo had begun with a sound. 40 years earlier, a network of deep space listening stations had detected a signal buried inside the background noise of the cosmos, the kind of noise that astronomers had long learned to filter out as interference. But one analyst, working late on a funding application she resented, had noticed something that shouldn't have been there. The signal was structured, mathematical. It repeated at intervals that corresponded to no natural phenomenon known to science. And it was old, impossibly, breathtakingly old. Older than the solar system. Older, perhaps, than the stars closest to it. Every attempt to trace its origin failed. The signal seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, as if it had been woven into the fabric of space itself. But when researchers attempted to replay the signal at increased power, not to send it, merely to study it, something happened that caused the project to be immediately classified at the highest possible level and locked away for 4 decades. 3 deep space listening probes near Jupiter stopped responding. A research station on the far side of the moon went dark for exactly 6 minutes and then rebooted, its crew with no memory of the interval. And a device recovered years earlier from a crash site in a remote mountain range, an alien artifact that had resisted every attempt at analysis, activated for the first time since its recovery. It hummed for 30 seconds, displayed a sequence of symbols, and then went permanently innate, as if it had delivered a message and its purpose was complete. The signal was locked away after that. Do not replay. Do not transmit. Do not study. The file was buried beneath layers of classification so deep that most of the people in this chamber hadn't known it existed until 72 hours ago. Now, with a countdown at 48 hours, and the alien fleet still keeping its strange, fearful distance, the order had come from the highest levels of what remained of global command. Activate the transmitter. No one had voted in favor with confidence, but no one had a better idea. While engineers worked to bring Project Echo online, linguists and artificial intelligence systems around the world had been analyzing the alien symbol, the one that had preceded the countdown. A pattern emerged in the early hours of the crisis, discovered simultaneously by a research team in Seoul and an AI system in Geneva. The symbol wasn't a word. It wasn't even a communication in the conventional sense. It was a marker, a designation, and it had appeared before. Buried in archives from deep space telescopes launched decades earlier, a faint record existed of the same symbol detected near a distant star system. The observation had been logged, briefly studied, and then forgotten, because the star system in question had, shortly after the symbol's appearance, gone completely silent. No explosion had been recorded, no debris field, no gamma-ray burst, no neutron star remnant, just silence, where before there had been a civilization emitting electromagnetic noise for centuries. Gone, erased, as cleanly as if it had never existed. Dr. Hammond had studied that archive report with shaking hands in the early hours of the crisis, his face illuminated by the screen in the darkened facility. He had spent his professional life searching for signs of intelligent life beyond Earth. He had imagined, in his more romantic moments, that first contact would feel like dawn, the beginning of something vast and illuminated and full of possibility. He had never imagined it would feel like this. What if something answers? The question came from Yura, the youngest member of the team, 26 years old, a signal analysis technician who had been recruited for Project Echo 8 months earlier and had never expected to actually sit in this room. She asked the question quietly, looking not at Dr. Ham but at the waveform on the screen. Her voice was calm in a way that made the question more unsettling, not less. Nobody answered her. The countdown read 9 hours and 40 minutes. Outside the facility, though none of them could see it, the alien fleet had begun to move again, not toward Earth, but away from it. The ships were increasing their orbital distance, arranging themselves into a wide perimeter, creating space between themselves and the planet below. Military satellites that had managed to reboot were feeding this data to the facility in real time. "They know," said Colonel Farhan, standing at the tactical display, watching the fleet's movement with an expression carved from stone. He had spent 30 years preparing for scenarios no one wanted to use. He had never prepared for this one, because no one had told him it existed. "They know what we're about to do." Dr. Ham looked at the activation panel. A single switch, a physical toggle, deliberately analog, deliberately simple, because the engineers who built Project Echo had understood that in the moment it was used, there would be no time and no patience for complexity. He placed his hand on it and felt the cool metal against his palm. "If we do nothing," he said, "Earth is erased." He paused. His voice dropped slightly. "If we send this signal, we may not like what answers." He looked around the room. 17 faces looked back at him. Scientists, soldiers, technicians, people who had devoted their lives to understanding the universe. None of them argued. None of them told him not to do it. The countdown reached 0. He pressed the switch. For a moment, a long, agonizing moment in which no one in the chamber breathed, nothing happened. Then the mountain moved. Not violently, not catastrophically, but it moved, a deep subsonic vibration that traveled up through the floor and into their bones, the kind of sensation that lives below hearing and above instinct. The transmitter was releasing its pulse, an energy output that exceeded every human-built device in history, and it was doing so in absolute silence. No light, no sound, no visible phenomenon of any kind. Just that bone-deep tremor, and the instruments on every screen spiking simultaneously into ranges they had never been designed to measure. The pulse rose through the rock and into the sky. It crossed the moon in seconds. It passed Neptune in under a minute. It moved through the outer darkness of the solar system, and then, as every sense on Earth tracked its passage and then lost it, it vanished into the deep. In the alien command vessels, alarms ignited across every network simultaneously. The response was immediate and absolute. Weapons powered down, engines ignited. And the fleet, the thousands of ships that had surrounded Earth for 3 days and silenced the planet with their presence, turned and fled, not retreated, not repositioned, fled with the urgency of prey. On 8th, people watched the sky in confusion as the darkness above them began to break apart. The ships were moving away. The countdown had stopped, and the sunlight, real, warm, uncomplicated sunlight, began to reach the surface of the planet for the first time in 3 days. Nobody cheered. The silence held, because something in the way the fleet was moving, the speed of it, the obvious panic encoded in that speed, told every watching human being that the ships above them were not leaving because humanity had won anything. They were leaving because they were afraid. As the alien fleet retreated beyond the moon's orbit, a transmission arrived on global command networks, the first direct communication the fleet had made in 3 days of silence. It was short. It translated itself automatically. You have activated the forbidden beacon. This system is now marked. We will not return. The transmission ended, and in the silence that followed, the word repeated in the minds of everyone who heard it. Marked. Not saved. Not protected. Marked. In the days that followed, researchers working under emergency protocols cross-referenced alien databases recovered over decades of classified programs, fragments of history that had never been meant for human eyes. References emerged to a civilization so ancient that the species currently filling the galaxy had evolved in its aftermath, like moss growing on the walls of an abandoned temple. They had built structures larger than moons. They had shaped energies that current physics could barely theorize. They had existed for so long that their history had become mythology, and then that mythology had become a warning, and eventually the warning had been simplified into a symbol, a quarantine mark attached to things that were best left alone. And then, in a single cycle, across every outpost and installation and colony they had ever built, they had simply vanished. Not destroyed, not conquered, gone, as completely as if someone had reached into the universe and neatly removed them, leaving only the signal behind, pulsing forever in the dark between stars, carrying a meaning that every species eventually learned to fear. We were here, and we are listening, and if you call, we will come. Every civilization that had attempted to trace the signal or replicate it had paid a price. Lost ships, lost colonies, lost worlds, not destroyed, erased, and humanity, in its desperation, had screamed their name into the dark. Deep Space Telescope detected the distortions 2 days later, gravitational anomalies forming beyond the edge of the solar system, vast enough to bend light, moving with slow and inexorable purpose toward the signal Earth had sent. The mathematics of their movement suggested something of a scale that the instruments couldn't fully resolve. The numbers simply ran out of room. A second transmission arrived. This one did not come from the retreating fleet. It originated from the Galactic Union, a network of civilizations so old and so vast that humanity had known of its existence only through hints and fragments in recovered alien records. A network humanity had never been invited to join. The message was calm, almost gentle, in the way that a statement of absolute truth does not need emphasis. Humanity of Earth, you have crossed a boundary feared by all advanced civilizations. From this moment forward, no fleet will approach your system. Your world is designated a forbidden zone. You are beyond our reach now. You are beyond everyone's reach. Global leaders listened in silence. No one spoke for a very long time. Beyond Pluto, the gravitational distortion slowed. They stopped, just at the edge of the solar system, as if pausing at a threshold, as if respecting a boundary, or studying it, or simply choosing not to cross it yet. Something vast had arrived. Something that had heard its name called across the dark between stars and had come, the way it always came, patient and ancient and incomprehensible. It did not enter the solar system. It did not announce itself. It did not fire or threaten or demand. It simply waited, enormous and still, in the cold silence beyond the last planet. On Earth, light returned to normal. In the streets, people stepped outside and lifted their faces to the sun with an expression that was not quite relief and not quite joy. Something more complicated than either. The satellites rebooted slowly. Aircraft landed on backup systems. Emergency broadcasts shifted from crisis to careful, cautious language, the language of institutions trying to explain something they didn't fully understand. Dr. Ham sat alone in the now-quiet facility, the transmitter powered down, the screen showing their ordinary static. He had not slept. He looked older than he had 3 days ago, in the way that certain experiences age a person not in their body but in their eyes. He read the Galactic Union's message again, slowly, the way you reread something you need to fully absorb. Beyond our reach. He had spent his life believing that contact with the cosmos would expand humanity, that knowledge of other civilizations would make the species larger, wiser, less alone. He had been right about one thing. They were not alone, but there was something else now. Something new in the taxonomy of the galaxy. Not protected, not conquered, not welcomed or warned away or ignored. Marked. A species that had called something ancient by its true name and survived the calling. A world that stood at the edge of the solar system's dark, knowing that just beyond the last boundary, something waited, patient as geology, vast as silence, awake now in a way it perhaps had not been for eons. Outside, the sun shone on a planet that had been given back to itself, and in the deep cold beyond Pluto, in the darkness between what is known and what cannot be named, something that had built civilizations before Earth's sun was born simply waited, and watched, and did not enter. Not yet. Earth did not see the danger coming. There were no explosions, no warning sirens screaming across city skylines, no alien attack beams splitting the atmosphere in two. There was only silence, a silence so complete and so wrong that people felt it before they understood it. The kind of silence that arrives when something enormous holds its breath. It began with the satellites. One by one, without explanation, without warning, they went dark. Phones lost signal mid-conversation. The internet collapsed in rolling waves across continents, taking stock markets, hospital networks, and emergency services with it. Air traffic controllers watched their screens fill with static as every aircraft in the world became, in an instant, unreachable. Military radar arrays across a dozen nations, systems designed to detect anything moving faster than a sparrow at 30,000 feet, returned nothing but white noise. Then people looked up. Dark shapes materialized above the cloud layer, enormous and perfectly still, blotting out the sun in slow, terrible increments. Within minutes, thousands of ships surrounded the planet, vast, angular structures arranged in a formation so precise it could only have been rehearsed across centuries. They hung in orbit like a crown of iron around a condemned prisoner. The sunlight dimmed, then it nearly vanished. In the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, cities fell into a twilight that felt nothing like evening. Every screen on Earth flickered and went black. Then, on phones and televisions and billboards and laptop computers, on hospital monitors and digital clocks in convenience stores, a single symbol appeared. It was geometric and ancient-looking, carved from mathematics rather than language, radiating an authority that made the stomach drop. No linguist could decipher it. No computer recognized it. World leaders transmitted urgent messages into the silence. The silence replied with nothing. Missile systems refused to arm. Fighter jets sat dead on runways, their instruments dark, their engines mute. Across 12 nations, nuclear launch protocols returned a single word: error. Earth's entire military apparatus had been switched off as casually as a child unplugging a toy. Panic moved through the world's cities like a tide. Grocery stores were stripped within hours. Highways became rivers of slow-moving metal as millions attempted to reach family members, to be somewhere, anywhere, that felt like home. Some people knelt in the streets and prayed. Others set fires. Most simply stood in their yards or on rooftops, heads tilted back, watching the sky with an expression that had no name in any human language. It was the face of a species that had just discovered, all at once, that it was very small. The symbol disappeared. A countdown replaced it. 72 hours. 3 words followed beneath it, translated into every language simultaneously, as if the fleet had studied humanity long enough to know all of them. Planetary cleansing commencing.